find your true self as well. Also, that which you must become.
You hated your father, didn't you? I saw the way you hit you, kicked you, made you cry.
Maybe killing you here is the only way to end this nightmare.
Silent Hill 3 is one of those games you don't forget once you play. Typically, Silent Hill games have this aspect to them that really keeps you thinking, and yet I couldn't fully resonate with this one. It's really good. I want to say it's one of the best games in the entire series, but I find it difficult to fully invest myself into what this game is. The most realistic portrayal of a teenage girl and adolescent fears. And that's simply because I lack a female's perspective. You see, Silent Hill 1 had us going through Harry's experience with Alessa's personnel hell, and even with that, we discovered so much about the world around us and the characters at hand. I feel that Silent Hill 3 isn't really like that. It's about womanhood, and I never have, and more than likely won't experience any of the fears that women have or go through. The supporting characters in this game don't always seem to have much going on besides helping Heather on her journey. Whether sketchy or truthfully helpful, there are many themes that, while creep me out, don't strike my core as it did others. In my last video, I had mentioned how people spoke about this game way more than the original, and I'm going to go back to that point really quick. This game is the sequel to Silent Hill 1, so you'd think there'd be more coverage on the prequel, and yet here we are. I want to say I thoroughly covered Silent Hill 1, and with the topics I'm going to tackle in this one, I'd like to say the same here. This game is talked about more often, but even then, most videos still miss quite a bit. I'm not going to say I'm going to uncover every hidden secret in this game, but I'm going to try to point out what I found. Considering all of this, I'll do my best to structure and point out anything I do notice or think is important despite my gender. And speaking of, I want to say how much I appreciate the developers. Considering the team was primarily made of Japanese men well into their 20s, they did a phenomenal job capturing the American teenage vibe, alongside the issues that teenage women can face during their adolescent years. Of course, Team Silent returned to make the third game and began development after Silent Hill 2, sometime between September of 2002 and May of 2003. Originally, the game was supposed to be an arcade rail shooter of sorts since Silent Hill 2 didn't quite sell that well, according to a tweet that Masahiro Ito made in February of 2019. Hiroyuki Uwaku, the screenwriter for Silent Hill 2 and 3, states that the feeling of fear prevailing is different from the second game. In Silent Hill 2, they focused on a sense of fear with sustained silence that progressively turned more into a strong sense of anxiety. However, in Silent Hill 3, they wanted a louder and more direct approach, and it definitely shows in the gameplay and storytelling. Heather's character was based off of two women, Sophie Merkel and Charlotte Gainsbourg, and had two feminine designers working alongside the lead character designer, Shingo Yuri. Claudia had a lot of redesigns done as they originally wanted to make her look strange and unconventional, but ultimately wanted her to remain ambiguous, so they gave her no eyebrows. And I guess that's not only strange, but also makes it harder to discern what she might be feeling. Douglas was deliberately made with flaws that show with age, going bald and often combing his hair back to hide a bald spot. Vincent was made to have a neat appearance, but designed to give you an uneasy feeling, as he can never directly look at who he's talking to. He's designed to be a hypocrite that's dressed nicely. This game was made using mocap, which at the time I'm sure was rather revolutionary, and would explain why most of the animations in this game have aged so well. Akira Yamaoka returns once again to make an obscenely amazing soundtrack, and as always, it shows. It's excellent. The opening track for this game starts with the first cutscene and boots up to "You're Not Here," and it's a definite change of pace from the first game. These more punk rock themed songs fit really well with the era that this game released in, and also fits the aspect of being a teenager. Lord only knows that this was the exact type of music I listened to growing up. The following track, End of Small Sanctuary, plays during the first small segment of the game, and it's just... I unironically listen to the song a few times a week, especially if I'm just hanging out with friends. The slow, rhythmic guitar with the reverb and a hint of fuzz. Yeah, it's awesome. Straight vibes. This game was finally released to the public on May 23rd of 2003 and received positive reviews with an 85 out of 100 at Metacritic, with the primary criticism being that the game didn't really innovate on anything from a gameplay standpoint that the previous games haven't already done. By November alone, the game had sold over 300,000 copies and topped sales charts in Japan. In the game, during the mall, there's this cutscene in which the player is barely able to see what happens and let alone try to understand what happens. They used assets from a strange trailer called Silent Hill Fukuro, and the trailer alone is odd and unsettling. Overall, I'd say the developers did an amazing job with this game and definitely deserved a vacation.
Where am I?
This game starts by quite literally tossing you into the wolves, and it is a statement for how this game will treat you as you go further. It is not here to hold hands or be slow paced. Going through this amusement park the first time around was super anxiety inducing and had me questioning what was going on. It's here we meet some of the enemy types that are commonly found around the game, so let's get this over with. Starting off, the first enemy that runs at you is known as the Doublehead, and its name is pretty self-explanatory as it's a dog with a split head. Next up is this giant tall amalgamation called the Closer, and I truly believe these things are supposed to be some form of embodiment to body dysmorphia and self-disgust. A few things to note with its appearance is its feminine traits with ballerina shoes and a dress, and its oddly vaginal-shaped face. It's also quite disturbing, besides that it does have its giant colossal arms that it uses to smack and prod at us. The final enemy we encounter here is called the Pendulum, and I'm not really sure what these guys are supposed to represent, but I believe they could represent some form of failed experiment or botched surgery. Perhaps it's two halves of a torso resembling a split personality. Once it's over, however, we wake up from that nightmare in Happy Burger.
What a nightmare.
Exiting the restaurant, Heather calls her father to let him know that she's on the way home. We're then interrupted by a private investigator called Douglas, who tells us something quite interesting.
Sorry I didn't call sooner. Yeah, I guess I was. Anyway, I'm coming home now. Oh, I didn't get that thing you asked me to. Okay. Okay, I will. I love you too, Dad.
Heather, I need to speak with you. My name is Douglas Cartland. I'm a detective.
A detective? Really? Well, nice talking to you.
Hold on. There's someone that wants to meet you. Just let me have an hour. No, half an hour of your time.
My daddy always told me not to talk to strangers.
This is very important. It's about your birth.
I'm not interested. Are you still following me? Do I have to scream?
Despite Heather declining, he follows her, and thanks to Heather's quick thinking, she escapes into the bathroom. And here we find a very similar mark on the window, which almost every time we interact with, Heather always has something unique to say. The mark on this mirror, it looks so familiar somehow. What do I know it from? Where did I once see it? And why does my head hurt so much when I try to remember it? These marks serve as our save states throughout the game. If we look at ourselves in the mirror, Heather then states, "I don't like mirrors. It's almost like there's an unknown world right on the other side, and the person staring at me isn't really me, but just an imitator." I know how stupid that sounds, but that's how I feel. But if I keep thinking about it, it just makes me feel sick. And really quick, before we continue, I'm gonna complain about something here really quick, and that's if you interact with something in this game, you cannot have any form of movement applied whatsoever. If you have the slightest bit of analog movement, it skips over the text at lightning fast speed and you can end up missing whatever was said. This wouldn't be an issue if the text would repeat itself, but it doesn't. It just repeats the last line over and over again afterwards. I know that this seems stupid, but why would inputting any form of movement skip dialogue? I mean, this doesn't happen in any other game, so why does this happen here? I ended up skipping through so much dialogue in my first run of this game because of this issue, and it's one of my biggest gripes with the game. It's probably a skill issue, but at any rate, we can somewhat infer that Heather most likely has a fear of mirrors, or perhaps has an underlying self-esteem issue. Regardless, this bit of dialogue here is extremely important for much later in the game. Beyond that, we can also examine the stall where it seems to be occupied, and we can then leave through the bathroom window. Hey there, really quick, just gonna jump in here. I forgot to mention this during the original script, so I'm just gonna add this in recording, or rather, editing. Opening our inventory this early on, we can actually see that we have a pendant in our inventory, and examining it, we can see a red gem of sorts, and Heather states that her dad gave it to her on her birthday, and it's one of her most treasured belongings. Exiting the window, we come back into this alleyway that leads us back into the mall, and I want to say that the lighting here is seriously impressive. This game looks phenomenal for a PS2 game, and they really popped off with this. Upon entering the mall, the music stops and we're left with an eerie silence where you just know something's wrong. Entering the door at the end of the hall, we have this section of the mall that is stained with what seems to be dried blood on the floor and a single shop that's just barely opened. Entering the door,
Stay back! Get the hell away from me! What the hell is this thing?
phenomenal graphics aside, The sound design in this cutscene was superb. The spongy wet sounds coming from the closer here is disturbing and did a wonderful job at making me uncomfortable. Voice actress Heather Morris did a phenomenal job voicing Heather in this game, so hats off to her. If you interact with the monster after the cutscene, you can see Heather contemplating reality and questioning what is in front of her, and when we look at the corpse that it kills, she questions if she should call the police or not, but doubts that they would actually believe what she saw. The model on the floor here is actually Angela from Silent Hill 2. Didn't she go through enough in that game? Exiting the door in the back, we can pick up the shopping mall map and move through the double doors where we're immediately assaulted by double heads. Not dealing with that. Turning around, we can go through the staircase and... Ugh, how freaky. This is a null body, and we see them pretty often. They're typically small enough, while there are some big ones, I feel like they look kind of like sperm, oddly enough, with their rounded off heads and spiky rear ends. Their legs also aren't bent normally, but maybe that's just me. Running down the hallway and entering a door, we can enter the save room. It's like a magic circle. I remember reading about it in a book on black magic. Does it seem so familiar because I read about it in that book? No, that's not it. It's not the book, it's from the altar. Altar? What am I thinking? Heather is quite confused, and this is gonna go on for a little while. Behind us is a crate that's hiding a key that we can't quite reach, so we'll have to return here later. If you happen to be on a next sphere like I am, you can grab the beam saber from the handle on one of the doors here. Exiting the hallway, we go into Helen's bakery where we find bread. Just kidding, I meant tongs. We use these on the pallet in the save room that we were just in, and this game's ambient sounds are consistent, to say the least. The keys let us open the bookstore where we solve a rather simple puzzle with Shakespeare books. And just to note that on hard puzzle difficulty, you actually need Shakespeare knowledge to solve this puzzle, so do with that what you will.
Hey, wait, what's going on? Where is everybody? Those weird monsters?
They have come to witness the beginning. The rebirth of paradise, despoiled by mankind.
What are you talking about?
Don't you know? Your power is needed.
How should I know?
I am Claudia.
So what?
Remember me, and your true self as well. Also, that which you must become. The one who will lead us to paradise with blood-stained hands.
Claudia, right? Did you do all this?
It was the hand of God.
I don't get it. What does she want me to remember?
We meet Claudia Wolf, who has an awfully similar name to Dahlia from the first game. She's super vague about what's going on, and Heather's reaction is pretty appropriate, to be honest, though some of the dialogue is a little strange. Personally, if someone asked me about my powers are needed, my response wouldn't be, so what, but rather, what powers? What are you talking about? But I digress. She's a crucial character to the story, and I'm sure that we're going to see more of her. Here we exit through the elevator, and entering it, not only do we find a radio, but also get to one of the more interesting cutscenes in the game.
Is this a dream? It's gotta be. Not even a kid could believe in this. When am I going to let go?
I did talk about this earlier, so I'll move on. The camera positioning here is impeccable. You can hear the double heads chewing and growling on the other side, but you can't see where they are or if they're walking about. Once we get the courage to move about, immediately just assaulted by multiple double heads throughout this hallway, and entering another door reveals another crowded hallway of closers. Entering one of the rooms in this hallway can net us the flashlight, and entering the bathroom we find a bottle of bleach and can knock on the stall from earlier. This could be a form of symbolism for periods, or perhaps a miscarriage, but I think this might have just been added here for shock value. We can also interact with one of the toilets for a funny little cutscene.
Oh, forget it. This is way too gross. Who would even think of doing something so disgusting?
This is a nod to Silent Hill 2, and I think it's pretty funny that they added this in. Past the hallway and onto a familiar room is a closer and a doublehead. I mean, come on, you get no moment to breathe here, it's really nuts. It's so suffocating, but yeah, it just feels like you're trapped in a corner. Entering the room we killed the closer in earlier, we can get a hanger and a bulletproof vest. We can use the hanger in one of the rooms to bring down a ladder, which will let us move on to the second floor. There's an interesting sight. Hospital gurneys with people in them. That's not familiar at all. Why would something like this be here? This isn't a hospital. And you would be correct, Heather. Why are these things here? We see a static TV, and upon interacting with it, we get a glimpse of Cheryl from the first game calling out to Harry. There's another save state around the corner as well. This again. Looking at it makes my head hurt, but at the same time, it's like so familiar. I know I've forgotten something really important, but I also have the feeling that I'd be better off not remembering it. In one of the rooms we find a walnut, and examining the walnut we can hear something rattle inside. On the third floor we can enter a restaurant that has a rather interesting sight, and Heather's reaction is honestly funny and really just portrays her character so well. What is this? Barbecue dog? Who the hell would eat something like this? Furthermore, who the hell would eat it? She finds a cooked key in the stomach, and inspecting the dog again, there's nothing else to worry about here other than who the hell is sick enough to do something like this? And even that, I'd really rather just not know. Using the cooked key, we can go through the cramped hallway and grab ourselves a steel pipe before entering the bakery again and finding detergent before exiting out the back. We come across this room with a giant, reasonably sized fan that can be turned off, and in the next room are a bunch of moths or something that we have to poison. Using the detergent and bleach we found earlier can make mustard gas, and turning off the fan and mixing the two results in the bugs dying and allowing us to make our way through the hallway. Heather's reaction to the cast always gave me a chuckle on my first run through. I want to mention that there are a ton of ambient sounds that sometimes randomly play, and man, do they do a good job of unsettling you or straight up scaring you. In the following room, we can crack open the walnut and find a moonstone, and backtracking to the third floor, there's a door that's locked behind some cryptic text that we'll get into in just a moment. Using the stone on the door unlocks it and we can move forwards, and finally, on the third floor plaza, it's completely empty. There's this jarring ladder down the middle that seems to lead into pure darkness, and it's here that we encounter the first boss of the game. This thing called the split worm, and just like the split head from the first game, we have to wait for it to open its head and shoot at it, and it doesn't take long for it to die. This boss could represent a fear of sex with its oddly phallic shape and it entering and exiting different holes in the arena. Furthermore, on the riddle on the door earlier could be a nod to childbirth, as 300 days is quite close to the typical 42 weeks, which is just about 294 days in a pregnant woman. It also talks about cries of pain from beyond the door. The imagery of hospital gurneys could also bring this forward. Once the boss is dead, Heather wakes up in a completely empty mall and once again questions what's going on.
What? It's the shopping mall just like before. Am I back?
Heather,
It's you.
what just happened?
You must be one of them.
What did I do? And what do you mean by one of them?
You're in on this with that Claudia, aren't you?
Claudia? What about her? She asked me to find you, that's all.
So you are one of them.
Claudia did all that? Look, I was just hired to find you. I'm not on anybody's side. I don't know anything about this. Why don't you start by telling me what happened here? And that monster. What the hell was that?
I want to point out the fact that Douglas experiencing events of the otherworld brings us back to the construct of the first game. He then pops a question and Heather's reaction is interesting.
Maybe you're just an innocent bystander, but I can't feel sorry for you because you dragged me into this. You know, if you hadn't found me...
What are you talking about? What's so special about you anyway?
If I knew that, I wouldn't be so confused, would I? But I know there's something. Something I've been running from and forgot for a long time. nothing.
Where are you going?
I'm taking the subway home.
What should I do?
Hell if I know.
Before we continue, I want to thank you for sticking with me this far in, and if you're enjoying the video so far, please leave a like, subscribe, and share the video with a fellow Silent Hill fan. At the time of writing this script, I have a whopping 6,000 viewers that have seen my first retrospective, which is absolutely insane, and if you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend watching that one first and then coming back here. I've received an overwhelming, in a good way, amount of support in that video, but a whopping 98% of people haven't subscribed, so if you'd like to help me achieve my dreams of being a full-time content creator, please hit that button. I deeply and forever appreciate it. And like the last video, if you haven't played Silent Hill 3, I'm going to recommend you to do so before watching the rest of this video, as we're going to talk about the story that we have seen so far, and the structure of the video will follow suit from there, so be warned. You there? I think they left. Still here? Okay, you ready to keep going? Awesome. If it's not obvious enough, the Heather that we have been playing as is a reincarnation of Alessa from the beginning of Silent Hill 1, and it seems that the religious cult has finally found Heather. Given their goal in the first game, we can only assume that they are here to force Heather to birth some form of god. And let's talk about this for a second. Pregnancy in general is terrifying, even more so with such a young age, and let's remind ourselves here that Heather is 17 years old. I mean, I was playing video games and hanging out with my friends at that age, but I mean, hey, take it from a female's perspective instead.
When I was 17, I was already thinking of what my life would be like after I graduated high school. What I was going to study in college, what job I would get after I graduated, what car would I be driving, what concerts would I be going to. The world seemed so much bigger than me, and I felt like I was ready to conquer it. Prom was coming up, senior activities were happening, and our big end of the year trip was all that we were talking about. When I look at Heather, I wonder if she was thinking about all of that. Senior year, prom, her first car, the big graduation, all the major milestones a teenager in the United States hits around 17 or 18. The mall was always a place my friends and I would go almost every weekend. Teenagers gather to hang out, meet with their friends, and just be themselves even for a few hours, roaming around their favorite stores, hitting up the mall food court, or even catching a movie. We see Heather alone, roaming the mall by herself. Even when I was 17, I've never gone to the mall by my own, due to the fact that it's huge and you never know what could happen. Years later, I still wonder if she's ever had any real friends, the ones that stick by you no matter what happens, and the ones that never judge you. As a woman, harassment, unfortunately, is something we seem to go through more times than not, whether it be catcalling, somebody grabbing us, or unwarranted hugs. When I would go to local conventions as a teen, I would get random people asking me for hugs that would linger on for way too long, or I would have people that would follow my friends around the convention center because we seemed really cool. When I worked at my first job and started college, I started getting stalked by people who I would just be nice to at my job. They would ask if I was working that day, where I was, and at some point my manager had to keep me in the back room until that person left and they eventually got kicked out. When Douglas was following behind Heather, I immediately sensed the annoyance and defensiveness that Heather puts up. Confronting this random person who's asking you for a moment of your time and you're just minding your business. With Stanley though, that's a whole other story. The strange obsession he has with Heather in the hospital reminded me a lot of when I had somebody in high school have somewhat of a, obsession with me. I would get random gifts from them, and even though I never asked, and it got to the point where I had to get the counselor involved to try not to have this guy be a part of any of my major classes during my junior and senior year. Stalking is no joke. It's probably one of the most invasive things someone can do. The obsession, the want to know everything and anything about them, and even a small, innocent interaction that you have with said stalker can turn into something much bigger than you realize. The moments we see Heather walking alone in the dark, I'm always petrified that something is going to jump out and attack her. I mean, naturally, this is a horror game. Something is always lurking around the corner, waiting to attack you. But if I'm putting it in real world terms, the scariest thing I can do is walk in the dark. Even when I'm walking around with my dog in the neighborhood, or walking to my car in the parking lot, I have this eerie feeling that something or someone is lurking behind me. There have been numerous stories of women and even some of my friends being followed to their cars or being approached by random strangers to get their number, or worse, sometimes even attempted trafficking. The flesh-like rooms we see throughout the game have always made my skin crawl one way or another. I don't know why, but there's genuinely something in those rooms that makes me get goosebumps all the time and even itch. It reminded me of our insides, our bodies, like if a doctor was doing a checkup on you. It may be a stretch, but it even reminds me of vaginal insides. It feels evasive in a way, like how the world is invading Heather as she tries to figure out what the hell is going on. I knew what the developers were going for when they decided to design those rooms and the hallways that way, especially in the room where Heather looks in the mirror and the flesh-like substance starts to consume her and the room. When I first saw that scene, I genuinely freaked out. Not because of the color or anything, but that this parasite-looking thing was invading Heather and everything around her. As a woman, biologically, things just happen to you and you really don't ask for it. You don't ask to get your period, you don't ask to grow breasts, you don't ask for cramps that hurt like hell, you don't ask for any of that, but as is nature, it just happens. So in that room, the parasite just appears, invading Heather like if it's a normal Tuesday, and suddenly you're on your period, and you gotta chug ibuprofen quickly so the cramp pain can end as soon as it started. Claudia mentions how Heather is ready to birth a new god, but I'm sorry, who the hell asked? At 17, hell, and me even at 17, we're not even thinking of having a baby or getting married or what have you. I was planning out my summer vacation, not looking into the Gerber Life program.
Entering the subway, we find Minmo, cat food. Look at this little guy. How cute. The only way we can figure out where to go is by reading the subway map, where Heather tells us that we need to go to Bergen Street Platform 3. In the same room is a newspaper that we can read. The context of the newspaper depicts that of a high accident area where a man fell onto the train tracks and was decapitated, and remains unclear whether his death was an accident or a self-eviction. A little further down from the subway map, we can make our way through the next section where we find a book on the floor. I read this a long time ago. It's a nothing little occult magazine. It seemed like a bunch of crap to me, but it's not so bad if you read it for fun. The souls of those who died suddenly by self-eviction or accident don't realize that they are dead. Sometimes they stay put and haunt that particular place. These spirits have lost their human senses and memories, and they can only keep replaying the pain and sadness of the moment that they died. The pain can get so bad that they turn to humans for salvation, or they begrudge humans their lives. At such times, they can possess humans. Places known as famous self-eviction spots or high accident areas are often to blame. You should be careful when approaching such locations, especially on the day or at the time of the death occurred, and that is if you don't want it to happen to you too. If you go further down from here, something happens. But you want to know the really interesting part? Check this out. Let's not read either paper and see what happens. No cutscene. This is actually super interesting because this tells me that the world is currently actively changing and revolving around Heather's fears. The creepy sounds of the spirit that pushed us onto the track that felt a little too eager to do so. The fact that this never happens if she doesn't read the articles is just insane, and is such a little detail that can be missed if you're not careful. Little elements here of environmental storytelling are very crucial, and it's amazing to see it happen here. It really fleshes out every individual player's experience. Seriously, I'm really glad they added this little detail in. It fleshes out the world that we've jumped into. So, I forgot this too. Shortly after this, we come across a new enemy type called the Insane Cancer, and for what this enemy could mean, I'm going to get into it a little bit later, as I feel it's not quite the time to speak on it. Sorry, continuing on. From here, the only other real thing of note is when we get onto the train, whenever we move forwards, the rear train car gets delatched as we progress throughout, and there's definitely no turning back from here. Once we reach the front of the train, it's discovered that there is no conductor, and Heather questions if the lead car unlatched itself and left us there. Moving forwards, we end up heading into the sewers, where as we descend, something interesting happens. Creepy factor aside, this is something that only happens in a New Fear playthrough, and on hard difficulty, the sections where these walls are red will drain your HP. The bloody pattern sprawling the walls and floor here could mean one of two things, and either or are a bit of a stretch, but here we go. One is possibly representing the inside of a woman during her period, and the health draining could be akin to the cramps that women often experience during these times and how painful it can be. Or number two is the fetus that's possibly growing within Heather, but maybe we'll come back to this later. Continuing on, I honestly forgot where the map for this area was, but it's not too bad, and the only really interesting thing that happens here is finding a fairy in the water in one of the later rooms. This is how you get the gold and silver pipe in New Fear. They look cool, but they don't offer much different than the standard pipe. You also have the option of lying to the fairy, but this will happen if you do so.
What was it that you dropped? Was it this precious gold pipe? You are a liar! I have nothing to give to you!
You can also find a medieval mall and some weird noises coming from the locker next to it. This is the only two-handed weapon we find in the game, and I never really used it as it's honestly just way too clunky and just not very good. In the same room that we get the secret pipes from, there is a monster that we have to get a hairdryer to kill. If you try to walk over this pathway without killing it, you'll just die instantly. There's also a neat little memo before this room about a worker who bravely decided to jump into the water to fight the beast, but honestly, that's about it here though. Getting out of the sewers, we come into this construction zone in the middle of the night. The sun was setting earlier into the mall, but I guess between the nightmare sequence and the sewers a few hours have passed, and at this point I'm gonna question that there's no way that this is Heather's route home all the time that she comes home from the mall. At no point does she question why she suddenly ends up in the sewers or why she's suddenly in a construction zone, and this kind of bugs me. The progression in the first game made sense. You find a note telling you to go to the school, and then the church bell to go to the church, Dahlia tells you to go to the hospital, and so on and so on. But here, it's almost like we're wandering about without a worry about how we've ended up at these places. The subway made sense, take the train home and walk a bit home, sure, but the sewers? Suddenly inside a construction zone? I doubt that this is a normal way to go for Heather. Moving on, this section of the game is a bit longer and it does have some more interesting stuff that we can talk about, so let's get into it. Entering the apartments and going up the stairs, we find that almost every floor is broken or has unsteady flooring in some way or form. Making our way all the way up to the 5th floor, we can finally enter a room, and if you walk into the bathroom in this room, we can hear some footsteps about. creepy. Entering the next room, we find a mattress on the floor alongside some bottles and drinks. Someone's certainly been here, and we're definitely not alone. On the wall here, there's this discolored patch that can be broken into to reveal a suppressor and a body on the other side of the wall. And Heather goes to mention, I hope those are just mannequin legs, but I guess I'm just not that lucky. Just like the black cat. I wish I hadn't seen that. The Black Cat in question here is a short story by Edgar Allan Poe where a man accidentally kills his wife and hides her corpse behind a wall. Now, a fun fact here is that in this broken wall is an Easter egg to Metal Gear Solid 1. In that game, there are certain walls that are discolored that can be broken and lead to items or certain areas. Solid Snake, the protagonist for that game, uses a suppressed SOCOM pistol, and thus, breaking the discolored wall nets us the suppressor. Considering Metal Gear Solid was made by and is owned by Konami, I don't think this is a far-fetch, though it is a neat little reference to put in. Checking out the mattress, we can throw it into the hole below and then jump down. Once there, the room isn't anything special, but heading out the window, ugh. Oh, and now this guy's here. This game seriously hates it when you backtrack. Once we reach the next section, we end up in the office of this mannequin company, and in one of the rooms we're surrounded by headless mannequins with the exception of one. Moving over to the other side, yeah, that's creepy. That's about it here though. To progress through this section, we go through the staircase to try and get some items to head into the elevator that's stuck open. Heading into an auto parts store nets us the jack, which we'll need in just about a moment, and across from that we have a fine art store where there are a few paintings that Heather can interact with. The first one is Mountain, and as Heather describes it, now this is a calm and relaxing picture. Nice and simple. The next painting isn't described, but Heather does focus on its price tag. Let's see. $5,000? Man, what a world. And same, Heather, same. The next picture is missing on the wall, but it has text "Flame purifies all." Flame, eh? Well, I don't know what kind of picture used to be here, but I'm not too fond of fire. It's scary somehow. Given what we know about Heather, her response makes sense. Melissa was burned alive by her mother, so I wouldn't be surprised if that fear of fire persisted through her reincarnation. The final painting is called Repressor of Memories, and Heather is quite confused by this painting. In the storage room, we find a screwdriver, and in another room, in that hallway, we find the katana. Unlike the first game where it was a new fear weapon, in this game it is a base level experience. Moving on, we can use a screwdriver to pry open an office desk that's hiding rope? Man, that's messed up. I know office jobs suck, but jeez. Well, using the jack on the elevator pries the door open and we can slip through using the rope. And on this floor, we can enter a floor fashion company that is displaying a bathtub. And in the next room is another bathtub, but it's like oddly placed. Interacting with it, however,
I knew it.
It's being invaded by the other world, by a world of someone's nightmarish delusions come to life.
Oh no, not again. Did she do this too?
If it's not clear already, the other world has invaded, and we get a little explanation from Harry to thank for that. The scenery here is odd and eerie in the best way possible. This game is certainly very bloody and slimy, to say the least. In the next room, we encounter a new enemy type, the Slurvers. Their appearance is odd. Well, what monster doesn't have an odd appearance in this game? But these things specifically are odd. They have these long snouts with teeth at the end to grab onto Heather, and they just crawl around everywhere. It's hard for me to say exactly what they could represent, but the general consensus that I've gathered is that it's a fear of being molested or sexual deviancy. In a nearby room, we find a picture on a desk, quoted, "Find the Holy One. Kill her." And it seems to be a picture of Heather at the mall. She appropriately says it's creepy, and when we enter the following room,
Heather. That's what you're called now, isn't it?
And who are you?
The name's Vincent. Don't forget it, okay? I'm on your side.
So you say. But how do I know you're not with her?
Her? You mean Claudia? Please don't lump me together with her. She was totally brainwashed by that crazy old hag. Well, I guess crazy old hag is a bit harsh. She is your mother, after all.
My mother? What do you mean?
You don't remember? Ah, so Harry didn't tell you anything. I guess he hid the truth to keep you on his side, eh? That figures. He's a pretty sneaky guy.
Don't talk about my dad like that!
Sorry. I apologize. Please, calm down.
How do you know my father anyway?
I know everything. I know about your past, too.
Then tell me what's going on.
You don't know even that?
That's why I'm asking. If you know everything, then tell me how I can put an end to this.
Not yet. Why not enjoy yourself a bit longer?
Enjoy? I feel like I'm going crazy. Does this place get to you at all?
Oh, it gets to me, all right. I find it most fascinating. Wait! I'm not finished talking!
I knew you were on her side.
How do you figure?
There's something wrong with you, too.
Vincent is clearly manipulative and doesn't really care for Heather's well-being, stating he knows everything including Heather's past and seems to get excited when the topic of the otherworld comes up. Heather leaves the room, and it's from here that I can concern that it's likely, granted how close these two things are in conjunction with each other, that Douglas was the one that took the photo as he was the one spying on us. I'd like to think that Vincent was the one to write the note on the back about killing Heather. As to why, we can't be sure just yet. In this room is some oxycodone and some healing items. Coming down the hallway, there's this glass plane with a wheelchair on the other side. I don't know why, but the world on the other side is calling me. This is most likely symbolic for the amount of time Alyssa spent at the hospital, and in another room we can find cigarettes, and Heather says to herself, "No more cigarettes for me, I quit for good. It's weird to see that she smoked at some point, especially at such a young age, and most likely did it behind Harry's back. We can also find a matchbook here that will be used soon. Returning to the painting room is something interesting. The painting that was labeled as Repressor of Memories has now turned into a new save state, becoming an analogy for Heather, and the missing painting from earlier has now appeared depicting a woman in a white dress covered in fire, surrounded by worshippers of sorts. There is also a faint white outline surrounded by the woman, and the description has changed too. By these remains may a person find the road to paradise. I've seen this picture before. No, wait. I've never seen it, but I do know it somehow. If it's not obvious enough, this picture is a representation of Alessa at the very end of Silent Hill 1. Likely burning the image is akin to Heather either forgetting or refusing to acknowledge Alessa's existence. We'll return here shortly, but heading back down, we come across this creature in the middle of the hall. And it doesn't seem to attack us, but it is blocking the path. In front of the monster is a children's book that tells a tale of a monster that attacked a kingdom, and no matter what happened, no one could defeat the monster. Soon, a priestess came to the town, and the restless king asked her for her help. The rest of the book here is missing, but I'm sure we'll find the pages soon. In one of the rooms, we can find a mini fridge with a piece of liver that we can take. Combining the oxydol, the matchbook, and the liver in front of the painting can cause a fire that burns the entire painting. I think the piece of liver being lit on fire here is a metaphor for killing a fetus. Going through the mini doors... that's weird. Okay, in this room we find more of the fairy tale, except in this part, the priestess goes to the monster and tries to talk to it peacefully, but to no avail, ending in the priestess's death. Continuing on, we find a room with coins and a vending machine. Taking one coin and inserting it into the vending machine gives us a life insurance key, and finding the room to use it in gives us the last page of the fairy tale, where God revived the priestess and immediately went into the monster's lair, where she despairingly casted a spell that ultimately killed the monster. Tu fui ego eris.
Tu fui ego eris. Weird writing. What was that?
Interesting thing here is that after Heather says this out loud, every monster in the building dies as far as I'm aware, so yeah, that's pretty strong if I do say so myself. The monster that was blocking our path is dead or disappeared, so we can go through the entrance of the office building now. Finally, we're on the last street right before Heather gets home, going down the dark alleyway and entering the apartments. We can find the apartment we need to go into by examining the house key in our inventory. Once we enter...
Dad, I'm home. Listen, something really crazy's going on. I think we should... Dad? Dad? No! 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 do this?
You're late.
But why? Why?
Revenge for 17 years ago, for one thing. If not for him, our dream would have come true. And then he took you away from us.
I'll get you for this!
There is another reason. To fill your heart with hatred. It must be this way. One day you'll understand why.
No, I'll never understand!
You must try to remember me, and your true self as well. You will birth a god, and build an eternal paradise. He's the one who killed your father. I merely gave the order. So, what will you do? I'll be waiting where all begins. In the town of Silent Hill.
There's a lot happening here, obviously, but something I want to point out is the fact that Claudia states something rather important here, and my main takeaway from this is that the monster can listen to orders? That's kind of interesting because that would imply a level of sapience, and that's kind of horrifying. That would imply that Claudia has the ability to influence or create a living thing and morph them into some horrific creature against Heather. Here, we fight a boss called the Scraper, and the monster design is great here, but I'm really not sure what the representation could hold in its design. The boss fight itself is nothing special, we run around and shoot him in the back a couple of times and we move on. So that's where the song comes from. Heather comes back downstairs to find Douglas in the apartment, and, well...
I don't know what to say.
Then don't say anything. I'm fine, so just get out of here and leave me alone already!
Calm down.
Calm down? How am I supposed to do that? My father is dead! He's murdered! Get out! This is all your fault! If it weren't for you...
I'm sorry.
Then go!
If it'll make you feel better, I will. Is he okay like this?
What else can I do? There's no one here to give him a decent burial. I'm sorry, Dad.
What do you do now?
I'm going to Silent Hill.
What's in Silent Hill?
I don't know.
Do you think it's safe?
Of course it isn't. I don't know what kind of hell is waiting for me there, but I've got no other choice. I don't care about God or paradise. If that's what she believes, then fine. But she won't get away with what she did. When I find her, I'll kill her myself.
Revenge doesn't solve anything.
Maybe not, but that's what I'm going to do.
How are you gonna get there?
None of your business.
I'll give you a ride.
I don't need your help.
Yeah, but it's too far to walk. Besides, I'm partly responsible for this. I'll bring the car around back. Come by and we'll finish saying goodbye.
You know, you might die too.
That's fine. Nobody's gonna cry over my grave.
I'll find that woman and make her pay. I promise I will. I wonder if my dad would be mad at me for thinking that way. Moving into the living room and inspecting the chair. Dad, why did you have to die? You told me you were the strongest man in the world. Liar. I want to make a statement here. And I'm not downplaying Harry's death in any way or form, however, but Harry's death is complete bullshit. It's not that he shouldn't have died, his death isn't what bothers me, but it's rather how he dies. He's sitting in a chair as if he didn't even try to fight back. This makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. He went through hell and back in the first game to get his daughter, and at the end of all of that he ended up with Heather, who he obviously raised himself so far. Why wouldn't he have fought back when the order arrived? In a way, Harry was the strongest man in the world. I mean, he killed God. It wouldn't make any sense for him to just sit there in his chair and accept his death. I would much prefer it if there were maybe a few dead enemies on the floor, and maybe if we got the shotgun from him instead of on the train from earlier, at least making it look like he fought a little bit. Also, where is Sybil? The game hasn't mentioned her yet, and I figured we'd find her by now in the apartment, but she's not here? If you saw my last video, you would remember that I mentioned that we'd talk about a certain ending from the first game at a later time, and I think that that time is now. In the standard good ending from Silent Hill 1, Harry gets the reincarnation of Alessa, and this ending is almost the same as the good plus ending, except that Sybil isn't with Harry. She doesn't escape with us, so what happened to her? It's possible that Harry could have killed her in the first game, or if she survived, it's likely that she just went separate paths from Harry. I just find it odd that she's not mentioned at all here. To me, the canon ending for Silent Hill 1 is the standard good ending for this reason. Once Heather leaves the apartment, Douglas informs us that he met with Vincent, who tells us to meet with Leonard and gives us a map of Silent Hill. Douglas also gives us Harry's diary on the ride there, and Heather remembers the events from the first game. She also retells them to Douglas, and I like this detail because it's not likely very many people played the original, so it's nice of them to add a recap at least in this way.
Started raining. Are you sleeping?
I'm awake.
You cold? What's the deal with Silent Hill anyway? It used to be a nice, quiet little town. But now...
You've been there?
Once. On a missing persons case. Never did find him. But I'll tell you, that's one screwed up town. My line of work, you hear a lot of nasty rumors.
I was born and raised there.
Sorry. I didn't mean to offend you.
No offense taken.
Anyway, I thought you grew up in Portland. What's wrong? Feeling sick?
My head's pounding, like the worst hangover ever.
Maybe you're car sick.
No. I'm just trying to remember. My childhood. Something terrible happened in Silent Hill 17 years ago. A woman named Dahlia. She tried to summon the ancient god of the town. She offered up her very own daughter.
That's crazy.
Maybe so, but it worked. The girl gave birth to a god. You see, that girl had special powers.
Powers?
Her classmates called her a witch. She could make things happen with her mind. She could kill people just by wishing for it. But in the end, that god was killed by a single person. My father, Harry Mason. I guess it wasn't much of a god if it could be killed by a human being. But I think Claudia's trying to do the same thing again. And I've been chosen as the sacrifice.
You've got some kind of power in you too?
After the god was killed, the girl reappeared. She was holding a baby in her arms. Before she died, she gave the baby to my father. He loved me just like I was his very own daughter. Even though he didn't know who or what I was. It was so sudden. I never had a chance to tell you how happy you made me.
Once we get to the hotel, Douglas says that he's going to go look for Claudia and tells us that we should check out the hospital. And it's here that we can inspect Harry's diary and read through it. I hope this will never come to any use. Maybe it's better if you never know more than anything else. I fear the possibility of your going away far from me. But sometimes we have to tell the truth. That's why I'm writing this, before I'm lost in death and oblivion. What happened back then? That has something to do with who you are. It all started 24 years ago, coming back from a vacation that my wife and I found a baby on the side of the highway. Since we were childless, we thanked God for letting us meet this child, this girl, and we took her home. 3 years later, my wife died, and another 4 years later, 17 years ago, I came to Silent Hill. I heard the girl's pleas and took her with me, not knowing why she wanted us to go there. And it was there that the girl went away. Not that she actually went anywhere, nor did she die. Returned to her original self. That's what Dahlia Gillespie said. Original self. That was the young woman burned by her mother as a sacrifice to God, Alessa Gillespie. Half of her soul escaped in those flames, and went on to live in a baby. In that girl of mine, of ours. 7 years passed before that half a girl returned to Silent Hill and made Alessa whole again. Newly strengthened, she vowed to kill God. A fetus nestled into this sacrificial girl's womb and was summoned with the usual rites. This was Alessa's wish, no matter what the outcome, even if her own existence were at stake. But that wish was not granted. My interruption meant that she prayed for the girl's return, and I alone couldn't bring her back. The newly born god willed once and was dead, all from that girl's and probably Alessia's conscious resistance. That is not the end. After God vanished in a glow of light, Alessia reappeared and gave me a baby. She looked a lot like the girl so long ago, and then Alessia was gone. Dead. There was nothing I could have done to help. I simply clutched the baby to my chest and ran off. The whole thing felt like a dream, but I had proof that it wasn't. The girl was nowhere to be found, and in my arms, the baby. And now 17 years have passed. It feels like only yesterday, and again, it feels like a million years ago. I confess, I had reservations at first about raising that baby. Could I love her? Her existence was thoroughly unexplainable. I thought, she could be that young woman who snatched away my beloved daughter. That led to sadness. Anger. There were times I put my hand around her tiny little throat. Several times, I even considered abandoning her. That's what a terrible person I am. But I decided to raise her after all. I couldn't just seem to let her go. When you look at me, you laugh, so even now, I can't forget about that girl. But I love you. I have no doubts about that. That's all I ask you to believe, to my precious daughter, Harry Mason. We finally get some insight on Harry's final thoughts and his perspective on the events from the first game. Despite his rather concerning thoughts towards Heather, I honestly think that Harry was a fantastic dad, and it's all because of Heather's reactions throughout that entire scene and even some cutscenes that happen later in the game. She defends her dad from Vincent's bold words and even getting angry at Vincent for speaking of her father in such a manner, attempting to give her dad a little bit of comfort in his death by placing him in bed and putting a flower over him.
I'm sorry, Dad.
And in the car ride, Heather even says,
I never had a chance to tell you how happy you made me.
It's a tragic loss, without a doubt. And granted, the hell that Harry experienced in the first game and raised Heather despite all of that. We even find out in one of the later sections from one of Douglas's notes that Harry murdered a cult member to save Heather from being abducted by the Order. Dude is not playing around. Yeah, I'm gonna put him up here in the tier list for the best dads in gaming history. Once we arrive at Silent Hill, our next goal is to get to the hospital. Really quick, I'm going to be using one of the unlockable outfits from here on, just because I wanted to switch things up a little bit. I had more outfits unlocked, just not on this specific save. Arriving at the hospital, we're immediately greeted with the nurse. And this time around, they don't have a parasite on their back like they did in the first game, but instead hold onto a lead pipe or a revolver to shoot at. Entering the lounge office, we can find a medical record regarding Leonard and someone else. Room S12. Presenting mild audiovisual hallucinations, emotional instability, obsessive ideas, suspect mild schizophrenia. We'll continue observation. Basically calm and cooperative with a strong sense of justice, however, according to reports, becomes very violent when overexcited. And another regarding a Stanley Coleman. Room S07, usually passive and cowardly, also egotistical, sometimes shows and acts on obsessive attachment to a particular woman. This has caused violent incidents, use caution. Weird, but probably nothing to worry about. In another room, we find a notepad and a doll? This day has finally come. That's right, the day when you and I will meet. I was always thinking of you, here in this gloomy cell. I never even knew your name or face until today. But now I know you're the one I've been waiting for. And haven't you been waiting for me? That's why you came to rescue me. Oh, how I love you, Heather. I want to give you my prized doll I made to commemorate our meeting, to the start of this everlasting love. Oh, I can already see your smiling face. Stanley Coleman. Oh, well, surely that's just a coincidence. I mean, how many people, have the name Heather anyways? Maybe it's a nurse or someone else that happened to have the same name. Inspecting the doll, Heather says, disgusting. You wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. And after reading that, yeah, I wouldn't either. Entering room C4, another note? The organization has me shut up here. They mean to break my will. To make me forget about all that. How about if I stick this to the wall? That would be worthless. You can peel it off, can't you? With that junk those nasty wenches won't stop using? If a thing has no meaning, there's no reason for it to exist, just as you exist for me. But why haven't you taken my doll with you? Oh, my gift must have embarrassed you. How cute you are, Heather. Okay, yeah, so maybe that's totally noble behavior, not weird at all. Okay, so maybe it wasn't a coincidence. I'm not really quite sure what to make of this. It's insanely creepy, and I'm gonna stop reading the rest of these notes with that voice from now on. Inspecting the glue-covered wall, we can find a key that's stuck on, and heading up to the second floor, we find another notebook from Stanley. You may have not yet realized your own true feelings, but you sense them unconsciously, and so you're trying to get closer to me. That's a virtue, the path to paradise. Isn't it a shame? I'm not there. Aren't you irritated? I long for you, but you're so cruel. Still, I want you, Heather. This is too creepy. There's a math-paced puzzle on this door, and I'm gonna be honest, I looked it up. Numbers aren't my thing, and they never will be. Into the nurse's locker, we find a perfume and nail polish. Something of note, I honestly never knew why it gives you perfume. I don't know if there's a specific use for it, but if there is, I'll make a note here at some point. We can use a nail polish to get to the key glued from the wall, and doing so allows us to get access to the staircase that we can go into. Entering the basement, there's this odd ear-piercing sound that can be heard, and approaching it... A wheelchair? Yeah, talk about deja vu. A little further ahead, the submachine gun can be found and picked up alongside a magazine in the same alleyway. Headed up the stairs, you can hear the faint sound of a door being slammed, and in one of the rooms on the third floor, we find a few seclusion rooms, and in one of them is yet another note from Stanley. Flowing freely your ebony hair, like the night sky, scattering fragrance. My heart clamoring in my chest, like a storm, you trifle with it. Your pristine glance is like a feast. When you smile, my thoughts disturbed. My breath, like opium, it drives me mad. Eric, a great poet who conveys my feelings so well. I shouldn't have let this place get to me, I should have never gone crazy, but it's superbly enjoyable to drown in my love for you. But why? Why won't you accept proof of my love? Don't stand for ceremony now. After all, you and I exist as one. What I give to you is the same as what I give to me. Jeez, man, alright, I get it, you're a weirdo. Unfortunately, there's tons of notes like these spread throughout the hospital, and it honestly gets worse as it goes on, with even one of them saying that he'll never lose sight of us. Fortunately, however, he does tell us that the code to one of the doors is behind the shelf in the basement. We can grab a camera from a rather simple puzzle in one of the rooms on the second floor, and in that same room, we can find yet another disturbing note from Stanley. From here, we can grab the code and head on up to the third floor. There's this final note from Stanley where the doll is now broken and he says that Leonard is no ordinary guy. Weird. Then we get a call from Leonard who confuses us for Claudia. And when we convince him that we don't work with her and we want her dead, he tells us to meet him at the end of the hall on the second floor. And once there, we find a door, and entering said door puts us through a running sequence where gates and doors open and close in a confusing manner. At the end, we see another seal on the wall, and examining it, we get a cutscene from Lisa from Silent Hill 1.
Still has an unusually high fever. Eyes don't open. Getting a pulse, but just barely breathing. Why? What is keeping that child alive?
Heather even remembering who she was and says that she was treated well in that hellish hospital. Afterwards, we get an interesting encounter going up these stairs. Going up a little further, we see an oddly sexualized nurse body, and now from my understanding, this is supposed to be a model of Lisa Garland, but they ended up changing it for whoever this is supposed to be. Yeah, we're in a real nightmare now. I mean, there's so much happening here. This section is very unruly, to say the absolute least. A lot happens here, and it's one of the most memorable sections in the entire game. Firstly, let's talk about the storage room. So you remember earlier in the video when the fear of mirrors would come back? Yeah, if this isn't a representation of what inner confusion and self-hatred would look like, I have no idea what would. I mean, it's practically a literal description of what Heather said early on. In another room, we find a phone in a locker with a rather interesting cutscene.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear. Oh, I forgot your name.
Who are you?
Oh, okay, thanks. Happy birthday, dear. Who are you? Happy birthday to you. Happy 31st birthday.
Is this Leonard?
That's the murderer's name, not my name. I'm not your beloved Stanley either. He's underground now. His new name is Number 7. But don't worry about that now. It's time to celebrate your birthday.
You've got me mistaken for someone else. Today's not my...
I'm not mistaken. Today is your 24th birthday. And I have a present for you. Which do you prefer? To give pain or to receive it? You can have the one you hate the most. Happy birthday to you!
But you're wrong. It's not my birthday.
Whoever this is on the opposite side of the line is weird for sure, but he has a point. Maybe not the birthday, but the numbers in specific. If Alessa was still alive, she would be 31 years old, and if Cheryl was still alive, she would be 24. Shortly thereafter, we find a room with a Valtiel stuck in the locker alongside a bag and a health drink nearby. Inspecting the Valtiel, Heather says it's like a child locked up in there with no chance of escape. On the wall, we find a bloodied white dress, and on the opposing wall, two pictures that seem to resemble both Cheryl and Alessa. Going down into one of the rooms, we find a rather disturbing sight of a body hung upside down with a blood draining into the bucket. We need to use the bag here for a little later. Going down into the basement and visiting number 7. Ugh, disgusting. The code here is randomized, I believe, but just follow the numbers on the bed with what the pattern gives you, and doing so will give you the charred key, which we can use to lead us into a room with an altar of sorts. Next to it is a religious book that speaks of a victim that was burned alive and some other religious stuff. Using the bag on the altar changes the room and reveals a ladder behind us, and heading down it, we meet Leonard, who is this deformed creature. He believes we've lied to him and calls us a heretic for being an unbeliever. This fight is rather easy, as we just shoot him every time we come up upon killing him. We wake up in the hospital as normal, and now we find a talisman with a rather familiar seal.
Leonard's not here anymore. I guess I should head back to the motel now. I hope Douglas is okay. Huh? What's this?
As we leave the hospital, Claudia and Vincent can be heard bickering at each other, while Vincent primarily mocks Claudia for her beliefs.
The memory of his cruelty is forever burned into my mind.
Yes, yes, and that's why we need God.
What you call faith is nothing more than a child crying out for love. That's why you're all alone.
Where's Douglas?
He went out, but he left a message for you.
Was there someone else here just now?
No, just me. Don't you want to know what the message is?
Yeah, what did he say?
He gives us a hint to go to the chapel on the other side of the town, and the fastest way there is to go through the amusement park. He also says,
Go northwest on Nathan Avenue. It's a bit far, but closer than heaven.
while he's helped us, it's not particularly clear what his angle is here, but regardless, we must move on.
Oh, hell.
Ooh, boy. Haven't we been here before? It's pretty much the same thing, except heading into the toy store, we can find a key for the roller coaster to shut it off. Before we move on though, we didn't talk about this little guy at the beginning. This is Robbie the Rabbit, and you want to know what my biggest fear was when I first played this game? This guy. You want to know why? Because one of the first interactions I ever had with any Silent Hill game was Robbie the Rabbit plushie in the Silent Hill 4 when it suddenly jump scares you through the peephole in that game. I genuinely thought one of these were going to come up and start chasing me or something, and man, that would have absolutely freaked me out and made me just even dread coming to this level. But fortunately, they just sit there and look creepy. Robbie the Rabbit seems to be some form of metaphor for childhood innocence dying, as he's now a mascot, or sometimes just a doll covered in blood. It makes sense when you look at it that way, but moving on. Instead of getting hit by the roller coaster and waking up in Happy Burger, we jump off, and before we wake up, Douglas confronts Claudia about Heather, and man, he isn't happy.
I hired you to find the girl, and you performed serviceably. What is it now?
You lied to me about Heather, lady. I don't like being used.
Lie? What lie?
That Heather was kidnapped from you.
But it's true. She was originally one of us. That man, Harry Mason, stole her away and kept her hidden from us.
Yeah, but she says she was happy.
She was brainwashed by him, deceived, because her true self had not yet awoken. She carries God within her. But when a lesser Mother of God truly awakens,
Yeah? What's gonna happen?
she will usher in the eternal paradise.
What kind of place is that?
A place with no pain, no hunger, no sickness, no old age. There will be no greed or war, and all will live by God's grace alone.
No this, no that, no nothing. A paradise? For castrated sheep, maybe. Sounds pretty boring.
I pity you. You still don't understand. You're going to kill me? Is it really so easy for you?
I've done it before.
Then I truly do pity you.
Waking up, we can move around and enter a haunted manor, and it's here we have a narrator tell us how this guy murdered an entire family before he just says he was joking.
A family of 4 was sliced into bloody pieces in this room. Ah, the cries of the children. The murderer was caught. Do you know why he said he killed his family? Because I felt I had to! Anyway, I'm lying. It's all just a joke. I wanted to scare you, that's all. The truth is, only one person died. By suicide.
Moving forward into the next room, we get jump scared by Danny.
That's Danny. A quiet young man, but quite friendly as you can see. He was so eager to meet you. His hometown is New Orleans, but he came here after first losing his way. Oh, maybe you might know. Where is the path to heaven?
Inspecting his body, Heather is mortified that he isn't just a dummy but a real person, before contradicting herself by saying, is Danny the doll or is Danny that hanging thing? Oh well, whatever, no biggie. Yikes, Heather. That was a change of pace rather quickly. Entering the room behind us, a practical joke is played out for us.
This mansion is quite old, so please watch your step. Sometimes the floor suddenly gives way, and beneath the floor, there's nothing. I'm so sorry. This place is just falling apart. The mechanism is broken, you see. It wasn't supposed to stop there, I assure you.
Yeah, whatever, dude. Let's just get out of here.
That was supposed to be the exit.
Oh, I don't like that sound.
But it seems that no
I don't know what the hell this thing is, but I don't like it.
Everyone really likes you. They want you to stay with them forever.
Okay, we're out. Going forwards a little bit is this Robbie costume that, fortunately, thanks to editing, I can actually read whatever the hell Heather is saying here. So, fun fact. Interacting with an object will not pause the world around you. I didn't mention this earlier, but that's bad. I'd like to think that's pretty important, Have fun trying to read something when the monster is in the vicinity. It's not going to happen, especially with these pendulums. That just, yeah, good luck with that. I haven't complained about the pendulums. The best thing you can do is just avoid them. If you shoot at them, they'll just charge you and you end up taking a lot of damage, so just avoid them. I don't know why I'm mentioning this right now, but yeah. Anyway, let's go. Heather's comment here regards the bloodied Robbie that we see on the floor. It's a rabbit costume leaning up against a wall, and maybe someone got beaten to death and was shoved in there? Maybe it was that big monster that killed him, if I'm not careful. I like the implication here that the monsters just murder people and shove them in a bunny suit. I think it's pretty funny. Is this where Scott got his idea for Five Nights at Freddy's? Moving on, we find a red shoe in the middle of a stage, and a chain we'll use to open a locked gate nearby. Attaching the chain to the gate and putting it on the column, turning on the attraction, gets the door open, and we can finally get to Douglas. It's here we see Heather is clearly starting to gain some sympathy and empathy towards Douglas, and I like this level of character development for Heather. It shows she's not just a punk teenager that doesn't care about anything or anyone. We find a little bit more about his past, and it's quite heartbreaking.
Don't worry. I'm used to it.
You old fool! Getting yourself hurt like that?
Sorry.
Why did you have to do that for me? What'll I do if you die?
What'll we do if this god thing gets born?
Come on. How powerful could a god from a dump like this be? I'm sure it'll be no big deal.
But anyway, something's gonna happen.
Who knows? Maybe we'd all be better off if it did.
But if this is how a god of mercy acts, I don't want to see any more of him. That's a pretty good reason to risk my life, don't you think? Plus, I'm just an old fool, right?
You think you're Superman or something?
I always wanted to be him. Besides,
Yeah?
I want to help you out.
You don't have to feel responsible. I know it's not your fault.
You remind me of my son.
You said nobody was going to cry for you.
Dead people don't cry. Stupid kid got himself shot robbing a bank.
But why?
Maybe because his pop was a penniless good-for-nothing. Who knows? Anyway, now I guess I'll never find out. Sorry. I shouldn't have said you reminded me of a guy like you.
Well, maybe if you had compared me to your daughter. Listen, I'll take care of the rest. You stay here and I'll be back when it's over.
You'll be okay by yourself.
Hey, no problem. Besides, my dad's not around anymore, so only I can do this. What are you doing?
Maybe killing you here is the only way to end this nightmare.
Unfortunately, we end up having to question Douglas's intentions at the end of this cutscene. So much for wanting to help us out, Douglas. Despite this, we can check up on him after this cutscene, and we can get some more dialogue between them.
What is it?
I just came by to make sure you were still alive.
Sorry. I'd come with you if I wasn't hurt.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the problem with older guys, huh? I'll handle things. You just rest. Don't die on me, okay?
A little further ahead, we can find his fortune teller house, and we can find one of Douglas's notes. This was the note in question from earlier in the video, and we find a little bit more on Douglas's investigation on Heather, even him finding out about Alessa having died in a fire. Got wrapped up in a murder case. Harry shot the suspect. Justifiable self-defense, so no punishment. Moved away immediately after, and started to use an alias. Apparently no connection with the criminal, just some occult freak. Slightly off from way back. Originally from Silent Hill? It's here where we find out that Harry killed a cult member in self-defense and shortly afterwards changed Cheryl's name to Heather for her own safety before moving to another town. This further proves the point I initially made about Harry's death feeling rather cheap. We can also find a doll head and we can move up to the boarded door outside. Here we can put the red shoe onto Cinderella and the doll on Snow White's hand, and this opens the rear door, which leads us to another section of the amusement park, where we find a notepad that looks awfully similar to the first game's save states. Inspecting it, we can see some writing, and of course, it's Harry. We receive some more insight into what he might have been thinking 17 years ago. Dahlia is the one who said it. Said that girl was a demon, that she took my daughter for a sacrifice. But it's not totally believable. I mean, appearances can be deceiving, but when I saw that photo in the hospital basement, I thought, that girl looks like Cheryl. Is that why I feel this way? Something's not normal anyways. Nothing good will come of this, but I can't think of her as a demon. Is it my imagination, or do I actually feel sorry for her? Why do I feel like she's looking for someone to help? Cheryl's what's important to me. Everything else can wait until I've gotten her back. Moving forwards, we can hop on the carousel, and we get trapped. To get out, we must kill the horses according to the memo, but doing so, we encounter a boss unlike any we've faced so far. Ourself, or at least some twisted version of it. Killing it reveals glowing letters on the ground. It would be better for myself to die after all. It's nothing to be afraid of. That child, that demon. When I think of the endless pain it will bring when it's birthed, I decided that instead of the suffering and cruelty I endured in that sick room, I would like to bestow a more gentle and peaceful death on myself. Why do I resist? I never thought of myself as such a fool. And Heather's immediate comment on it afterwards. Alessa, I guess it's kind of strange for me to call you that since you are me, but you know what? You and I don't think alike after all. It's not like I don't remember that sick room either. And as it turns out, what we thought seemed to be some form of memory of Alessa, and it's a strong symbolic representation of Alessa's want to die. Well, I can't say the word out of fear of the algorithm kicking this video goodbye, but I'm sure you can understand from the context. Heather, on the other hand, wants to live. Desperately so. Exiting the carousel, we find ourselves in a strange hallway with religious scripts rattled on the wall. If you really take the time to read these, I'd like to think that these are prayers that Claudia has kept to herself, or perhaps written somewhere, as it really suits her thinking. Entering the door at the end of the hall, we come face to face with Claudia, and finally, we're here to end it all. Heather pretends to be Alessa and almost tricks Claudia, but unfortunately her hatred shines through and Heather clenches at her stomach in pain, and Claudia walks off.
How did you get here? It was Vincent, wasn't it? He led you here. When will he cease his meddling? But it's just as well. Luring you here also serves my purposes.
Checkmate.
Not yet. The time is not yet at hand. The time when all will be forgiven their sins. When the paradise we have long dreamed for will arrive. After the judgment and atonement, an eternity of bliss. Oh, Alessa, the world you wanted is nearly here.
That's not what I want.
Not you. Alessa, your true self.
But I am Alessa. My little Claudia, my dear sweet sister.
Alessa, is it you? Oh, how I've missed you.
I don't need another world. It's fine the way it is.
But you said it yourself. The world must first be cleansed with fire.
But that's not what I want now.
Alessa, don't you want happiness? Have you become blind to all the hopeless suffering in the world? We all need God's salvation.
Listen, suffering is a fact of life. Either you learn how to deal with that or you go under. You can stay in your own little dream world, but you can't keep hurting other people. Besides, I'll never forgive you for hurting my father.
I wish only for the salvation of mankind. But for that to happen, the world must first be remade. And for that, we need God.
You self-righteous witch! No one asked you to help!
God is growing within you. You despise me, don't you?
You're damned right I do!
That's good.
Well, here we are, the end of the road. Behind the podium, we can find an Eye of Night tarot card, and examining the stained glass, Heather mentions that she used to come here all the time as a little girl, but that it wasn't exactly her. In this room, the paintings on the wall tell us what seems to be some sort of prophecy or retelling of how this god came to be. Entering the first door, we come across a church map, and definitely the weirdest map that I've ever seen, because it looks like it was drawn by a child, and I think that's the point, as Alessa came here before all the time. Entering the confession booth, we hear someone crying, and after listening to their plea, we get prompted with an interesting choice. Saying nothing leads us to just exiting the room and carrying on. Saying, "I forgive you," causes the woman to cry and thank us. It's a strange choice, but what you pick here will heavily impact what ending you get. Moving forwards, the chapel seems to morph into the other world, and we can find a room here with a cassette tape and some notes. Represents the deity known as the Halo of the Sun in heraldry. Symbolizes a religious group. 2 outer circles are charity and resurrection. 3 inner circles are present, past, and future, usually drawn in red, occasionally drawn in black or other colors. But blue reverses the meaning into a curse on God and is therefore forbidden. So now we know what those save states we've seen all game actually symbolize. Admittedly, I first thought they were the seal of Metatron from the first game, but they do look quite different. Past this, we come across some sort of I don't really know what you want to call this, but it's creepy as all hell. My understanding is that this is a child Alessa crying and walking into a room that leads us to this giant hall that we can fall off of if we're not careful. But before entering the double doors, we find the biggest seal that we've seen all game, and Heather says, "So death isn't the end." Pretty good deal if you ask me. Thanks to reincarnation, I died as Alessa, but I'm still living as myself. But you know, just the thought of it is starting to turn my stomach. In this room is one painting in particular, Saint Alessa, Mother of God, Daughter of God. This picture, that's me. I'm holding the baby, and I'm the baby being held. The me that wanted death and disappeared with God 17 years ago, and the me here and now that sought life. In the giant hallway, we can progress through a few different rooms, one of them being a library of sorts that contain a few interesting reads. One book explains the history of the tarot cards, and the other one goes into the brief history on the ancient gods of Silent Hill. On the desk, we find a moon tarot card,
Hiya, Heather.
You show up everywhere, don't you?
You make me sound like some kind of unwanted pest.
Well, who are you anyway?
Haven't you realized that yet?
Yeah, you're on Claudia's side.
I told you not to put me in the same category as that mad woman.
Well, you're pretty loony yourself.
It's true. We believe in the same God. But I'm quite sane.
So why did you help me out then? Was that also part of trying to resurrect God?
It's not uncommon for people to worship the same God and still disagree.
God? Are you sure you don't mean devil?
Whichever you like. The point is that now I really am on your side. I don't want God to be born. Wouldn't be convenient. Much too unpredictable.
So you've been using me to stop Claudia, is that it? Do your own dirty work.
My dirty work? I think we both had our own interests in mind. You hate her too, don't you? You're the only one who can get it done. I don't have powers like you two. Besides, I always hated getting all hot, sweaty.
Oh, really?
I'm just looking out for myself. Everyone does it. Don't stand there looking so smug. You're the worst person in this room. You come here and enjoy spilling their blood. And listening to them cry out. You feel excited when you step on them and snuff out their lives.
Are you talking about the monsters?
Monsters? They look like monsters to you?
Oh no.
Don't worry. It's just a joke. By the way, I forgot to ask you. Did you get the seal of Metatron?
What's that?
You don't have it? Leonard was carrying it.
You mean this thing?
Yes, that's it. As long as we have that, we're fine. Here, take this.
What Vincent says in this cutscene is shocking, to say the least. But he has some merit to his words. Remember what I said earlier about the monster that murdered Harry, that Claudia ordered? There's another bit of evidence in the hospital that can be found and read where the doctors begin to antagonize one nurse and put her in a confinement room. It's the same nurse that we find next to Stanley Coleman's confinement room. It could be a coincidence that Heather's anxiety got to her after she read it. After all, when we read the note in the subway, we were attacked, so it could be the same thing here. Except that even if you don't read the note, the nurse is still there, so just something to think about. Once the cutscene is over, we can read the book that Vincent gave us and go into detail about what the Seal of Metatron is. Metatron is known as the Agent of God and has protective and dispelling properties. My assumption here is that it's supposed to unsummon or dispel God. From here, we can end up in a bloodied version of the apartment with a diary on the bed. I sometimes have the sense that, even now, that girl is a reincarnation of Alessa. I don't worry much about it now. That's all forgiven. You were unloved, Cheryl. Or was that Alessa? Now Cheryl is Alessa again. No matter whose reincarnation she may have been, that girl was my most beloved treasure. But that name was a mistake. At the time, I thought of her only as a replacement for my lost Cheryl. When she knows the truth, will she feel bad? That's what worries me. Thanks, Dad. So I was Alessa after all, but I do give just a trace of one more memory left. I haven't forgotten my sweet and gentle mother. Once again, Cheryl is remembering who she is and who she wants to be now, with confirmation from her dad that she in fact was Alessa. We can come into a corpse room of sorts where we can find a hanged man tarot card, and heading over to another section of the church, we can come into Alessa's room. We can pick up a brass key on the wall and another reincarnation symbol on the shelf. No, it wasn't me. Alessa wrote this a long time ago. That chapel altar. It wasn't that one beautiful chapel, it was some other altar somewhere else. Once we've saved, we can find another one of Harry's notepads from the first game. She's just beyond this door. I don't know how, but I can sense it. She's not the only one here. I sense the presence of something extremely dangerous, even sickening. Or maybe that's what they call God. Nevertheless, I will open the door, but enough of this idle chit-chat. God, I'm not, but I fully intend to save her. No, them. Here, Cheryl can also find her old sketchbook from 17 years ago, and inside of the sketchbook seems to be some long drawn-out poem that's primarily the way you solve the puzzle door this time around. Last time, we collected a bunch of artifacts and placed them onto the door. This time, however, we're collecting tarot cards. Exiting from here and heading down the hall and walking into another room, we can find another crying ghost of Alessa walking into the wall. And just ahead of this is Valtiel, this time with two women with red dresses hanging from the roof. My interpretation of this is the duality of Alessa's lives, one being Alessa's and the other is Cheryl. I didn't mention this earlier, but every time we see Valtiel spinning his wheel, he's always looking up. And it just so happens to be during a time where Cheryl is either climbing a ladder, or in this case where it appears that he's looking up the skirts of both women. Perhaps he's trying to see if the god has been born? To me, Valtiel always seems to be looking at Heather in some sort of perverse way. There's a hidden cutscene early on that can be triggered in the mall, where if Heather dies, she could be seen being dragged away by Valtiel. And admittedly, this creeped me out, as we never know what his intentions are. Either way, it's a violating thought. Remember earlier when I mentioned the insane cancer? Well, now I think is a good time to talk about it. Several times throughout the specific level, we have seen them aplenty, blocking the halls or just barely being avoidable. The insane cancer is this grotesque, fatty, bulbous piece of walking meat, and its symbolism is quite different from that of the other monsters that we've come across. To me, the insane cancer is a representation of God within Heather. Its appearance can be contrasted with themes of common fears of pregnancy, as most women fear they will feel disgusting, fat, and bloated. They may even potentially symbolize the sin of sloth, one of the 7 deadly sins, as they are seen often simply sitting somewhere without moving until approached or provoked. Heading into the hidden room that Alessa walked into, we can find the hospital basement room from the first game, and there's a book on the chair nearby. We can grab a full tarot card, and the book also speaks on the Aglaophotis being a red liquid resembling blood that has the power to dispel evil spirits. It is also stated that it can be vaporized or applied as a poultice to guard against demons. A poultice, huh? Didn't we see something like that before? On the desk, we see the picture of Alessa. It's a picture of me when I was 7. I look bored and sad. Well, of course I do. It was always like that back then, 24 years ago. Dahlia used me to summon God. God was in my womb, but I couldn't deliver her. Then I was shut up here in this hospital room and I stayed here until Dad helped me out when I was 14. God ate away from within, driving me mad with suffering. But there I was, wishing I could just die and be done with it. I went on living that nightmare for 7 years. Looking at this bed just reminds me of those awful days. And I don't want to remember them, because I'm not Alessa anymore. But Alessa is still me. I'm really not trying to deny it or anything. I feel like Cheryl's thoughts are mixing up here with Alessa's experiences in this room, and I honestly can't imagine what that's like. Making our way back to the chapel, everything becomes corrupted with blood lining, the floor and veins scraping and forming the wall. Entering the locked room, we find another insane cancer and... Holy fuck, this scared the shit out of me. Mind you, I was fully invested in the gameplay here and I was trying to figure out where to go in this section when all I hear are these footsteps rapidly approaching behind me. Genuinely jumped and freaked out for a moment. I mean, you can see it in my reaction in the gameplay. Dealing with both enemies and moving on, we come to a classroom and a desk on the letter from Kay Gordon, the teacher from Silent Hill 1, who speaks on Alessa being called a witch and is seemingly a rather depressed child and thinks she may be abused as she never comes in without a scrape or a bruise. Even contemplating how he could help her as her expression is pitifully dark for a 6-year-old. Behind us, desks are scattered as if trying to stay away from the desk in the middle, which just happens to be the same desk from Silent Hill 1. Cheryl, or rather Alessa, doesn't go into detail on how she was bullied, and I think this is a bit of a missed opportunity to see how her classmates treated her. She just goes to mention that it was her desk, and that's about it, but no mention of bullying or seclusion. Exiting the classroom, we can enter another room with a tape deck and some notes regarding Vincent. People are starting to voice their dissatisfaction about Father Vincent using the organization's money for his own personal benefit. I've also heard rumors that Father Vincent has been extorting donations from some followers. Is he really the right person for such a position? I'm in no place to deny all he's done to make the organization grow. Inserting the cassette tape we found earlier into the tape deck.
Do you know about what happened here 17 years ago? You've been here a long time. You must have heard some details.
A group of pagans, blinded by earthly desires, spit in the very face of God. They tried to use the seal of Metatron to prevent God's awakening. But God drove the unbelievers away and threw them into the abyss. But due to their wickedness, God was unable to be born properly. And so, she has slumbered ever since, in the womb of the Holy Mother, until the time of the awakening. That's all that I know.
That's it, huh? Well, thanks.
Father Vincent, I heard that the Holy Mother has been found. Is it true?
Alessa has been found? Did Claudia say that?
Yes.
Then it must be true. Her sight rarely fails her.
Bless the Lord.
Maybe it's because of her great faith. But I could never be like her. I wouldn't want to.
Nor I. The truth is, Sister Claudia frightens me a little.
Well now, let's both show our faith by forgetting about this little talk, okay?
Yes, but does that mean this land will finally be the home of eternal paradise?
If God wills it, my sister. If God wills it.
While the cassette tape does more to explain the events of what happened before Cheryl was found, the note on the table explains why Vincent has helped us the way that he has, and explains what he meant in the cutscene earlier. God being born and bringing a paradise doesn't work for him. He wouldn't make any money and his current lifestyle would be over. It's like he said, he's just looking after himself, without really caring about Cheryl at all. Down the hall, we can find Claudia's room and the High Priestess tarot card. God damn it, this is what I mean about the damn dialogue being skipped. Fortunately, I can edit this and see exactly what it says. The name Claudia Wolf is written very small on the cover. It looks like it was her diary, November 10. She didn't die then, she was born, I knew that for a fact. But then why haven't I found her yet? They were supposed to need her power to build paradise, for the happiness of the people. She was supposed to be reborn for that. I'd really like to see her. Number 14. Read the Book of Praise. I want to thank Father for lending me such an invaluable book. I found out what I'd been searching for in here, how to awaken God. But it's much too cruel. Will I be able to pull it off when I see her? November 16. I was free all day, so I read A Modern History of Refugees and Young Slaves, Child Exploitation. I don't want to be a bystander here in this world. I can't do anything now though, and that's what's hard. On her desk, we can find an old birthday card, and Cheryl, though likely from Alessa's memory, says, so she was still hanging on to this. To little Claudia. Happy 6th birthday. I love you as if you were my real sister. Here's to you. So it's here that we find out a little bit more about Claudia. Judging from the birthday card, one can assume Claudia and Alessa grew up together in some way or form. From her letter, it's apparent that she wants to bring about paradise, and she reads books on sensitive topics about world suffering. In a way, Claudia hates Harry not just for taking Alessa's reincarnation, but for preventing paradise from happening. In a way, Harry did take her childhood best friend away, though obviously for different reasons. I have to ask, was Claudia even aware of all the suffering Alessa went through? Being burned alive and being forced to give birth to a god? Splitting her soul in half? It's just that no matter how I put this, whether they were friends or not, it just seems to me that Claudia is friends with Alessa primarily because she just happens to be the mother of God, the god that tends to bring out this paradise. It's why Claudia wanted Heather to remember who she used to be, though unfortunately for her, reincarnation doesn't always mean you become the exact same person. As Heather understands, she is a reincarnation of Alessa, but is not Alessa, but rather Cheryl. And to Claudia, she's been brainwashed by Harry, which is what drove her to finally kill Harry. After this, we can finally enter Alessa's room and put the cards on the wall in the order that they go in. This of course varies from puzzle difficulty that's chosen. Once inside the room, this unsettling track plays with a man chanting in the background, and upon entering the final door,
What do I want? Well, for the two of you to die, that would be nice. Then I could relax.
When did you stop believing in God? God lives. Just look around you.
But I do believe in her. In my own way. I fear her, and I adore her. But I haven't lost my mind like you. You think that this is the work of God? Isn't this all nothing more than your own personal nightmare? Just like Alessa 17 years ago? If this really is the work of God, then I'd say she has lousy taste.
You mock God? Traitor. You will go to hell.
Not that again! Who do you think you are, claiming to know God's will?
Go home, Vincent.
Home? This church is my home. I built it with my power. The power of money that you view with such scorn. Although I admit that this atrocious scenery is all yours.
If you continue to get in my way...
Did you kill me? Well... Well... The guest of honor has arrived. Let's get this party started. Heather, go ahead and kill this crazy bitch. This demon who claims to speak for God. The time has come. You can kill her now.
You'll go to hell!
What did you do?
Cheryl, the fuck does it look like she did? She stabbed him.
Nothing important.
You're not going to run? I guess this is the end.
No, the beginning. As Vincent said, the time has come. Alessa, I'm saddened that you didn't agree to this on your own. But I thank you for nurturing God with all the hate in your heart. It's time for mankind to be released from the shackles of sin which bind them.
But a God born from hatred can never create a perfect paradise.
Happy people can be so cruel. Is it so hard to believe that sympathy could be born out of pain and suffering? Why do you reject God's mercy? Why do you cling to this corrupt world? You know that only God can save us.
And save you too? Happy ending? I'd rather go to hell.
No, I don't expect to be saved. And that's fine. Alessa, my dearest. For the pain that I've caused you, I deserve no mercy. Even if it was to save mankind. It was too deep a sin. It was hubris for me to try to hasten the day of her arrival. Sacrifices were made. And those are my sins.
If you feel so guilty about it, why don't you go to hell? Heather, use the seal.
Vincent? The seal of Metatron?
Now your stupid dream is over.
Oh, that's just a piece of junk. What do you think you can do with that? Do you really think it can kill God? I'm sorry to see you fell for my father's foolishness.
What?
You're pathetic. But God loves even you. Now, Alessa, there's nowhere else to run. Just accept it, Alessa. The pain will disappear. I've been waiting so long for this. witness to it. Judgment Day. Alessa?
Shut your stinking mouth, bitch!
After this cutscene is over, we get this awkward silence with Claudia standing there and Cheryl being able to move around and examine things. Looking at Vincent, Cheryl says, "Vincent's dead. I hate him too, but it doesn't mean this makes me happy. Why couldn't I have stopped Claudia? If you try to exit the door, I've come this far, I can't run away now." If you take too long to do anything, or if you attack Claudia, Cheryl gives into hatred or runs out of time and ends up possibly giving birth. Otherwise, opening the pendant that has been in our inventory the entire time.
What are you doing?
Dad.
She is nearly here.
With the Aglaophotis, Cheryl vomits the fetal god onto the floor, and when she attempts to snuff it out, she's pushed by Claudia, and she...
What is this?
Looks like God didn't make it.
Stop! God is...
Claudia.
How the hell did she even swallow that thing? Ugh. Before we continue, I want to point out again that Harry gave her this amulet a long time ago. He knew the order was going to come after her, and he just gave her a small amount of Aglaophotis in the event that she's being forced to give birth to God. I'm going to come back to this point once again, but my statement about his death is proven once again. I refuse to believe that he sat in a chair and accepted his fate. Between him killing a member of the Order in self-defense and moving Heather away from Silent Hill and even giving her a small dose of Aglaophotis as a precaution, yeah, he knew this was going to happen eventually, it was just a matter of when. Continuing on, Claudia is affected immediately by this, and Valtio comes and forces her through the hole. If this giant hole in the ground isn't some fucked up analogy for a vagina, I don't know what is. If you try to leave, Cheryl says, "I want to get out of here, but I can't. This is for Dad, and for myself, and for Claudia, too." You see, I think this is interesting because that sentiment can't come from Cheryl. This has to come from Alessa. Why do I think this? I mean, just watch what she's about to say. Cheryl suddenly caring for Claudia's well-being has nothing to do with her, but rather Alessa's imminent memories. Valtio covering the deformed god's face is akin to accepting a death to embrace the afterlife, and it's clear that Claudia's body is transformed in some strange way. This fight is very long and drawn out, but like any Silent Hill final boss, it's certainly not easy. But at least this time, we have some time to react and think about how to heal, unlike the last time.
Is that the end? I guess it's time to roll the credits.
Cheryl finally has a moment to feel something, and she begins to cry over her father's death, and it's honestly heartbreaking. While no sound plays here, the main reason Cheryl turns around here was originally supposed to be because of a baby that was crying. They mentioned this in the documentary for the making of Silent Hill 3, but they vaguely mention it and they don't really go into much detail afterwards.
Is that the end?
Everything is always relative.
I guess it's time to roll the credits.
Including you, especially when you find out who you really are.
It was removed for reasons unknown as far as I'm aware, and everywhere I look kinda seems to just lead me into a dead end, so hopefully that explains it. After this cutscene is over, Cheryl meets back up with Douglas at the amusement park.
Not yet. You're still alive.
Oh! Just a joke.
You've got terrible
I'm
taste.
sorry.
Heather, did
You don't have to call me that. I'm not hiding anymore.
You want me to use your real name? What was it again?
Cheryl. The name my father gave me.
You gonna let your hair color go back too?
I don't know. Don't you think blondes have more fun?
And I guess after going through something fucked up, I'd probably choke like that too. But if you noticed, I started calling her by Cheryl a little earlier. Apart from it being apparent that she is Cheryl, even if she didn't directly say it, plenty of evidence was laid out for us that she absolutely identified herself as Cheryl, and not Alessa. And let's not forget that she used a fake name for a long time to hide from the Order, so in the end, she always has been Cheryl. This is the standard ending for the game, and there are two others. One is a possessed ending where Heather kills Douglas in the park and could possibly lead to Claudia's prophecy of Heather leading the paradise with blood-stained hands. And the joke ending is the UFO ending, where having a certain costume equipped and killing a set amount of enemies before you walk into the apartment, we see Harry still alive alongside James, who's trying to hide in the background, just chilling with an alien before they bomb the entire town of Silent Hill. Honestly, this is my headcanon. I don't care what anyone says. This is the best ending.
I can't believe that. I'm going to Silent Hill, and I'm gonna bust some heads.
Oh, Dad, you're the coolest!
After you beat the game once, you can gain access to a few weapons and different costumes like the beam saber, a flamethrower, and an unlimited ammo submachine. There's also the Princess Heart costume with the Heather beam and the Sexy beam. These are all joke weapons and items primarily here for fun. You can always look up the codes for these online. There are also a ton of different costumes throughout the game. I unlocked some to show off, but I won't be going into too much detail with these. Once again, I thank you for watching this video and sticking through to the end. I appreciate you hearing what I have to say regarding the third game in the series, and if this was the first time you've come across my channel, feel free to watch my first video on Silent Hill 1, and if you're returning from that video, welcome back. To those who are new, I would plead for you to subscribe and leave a comment if you feel like I missed anything, or if you have any memories or thoughts that you'd like to share regarding the video or the game itself. I got tons of amazing comments on my last video, so I'm excited to see what you guys have to say on this one. As always, have a great one.